I believe most ISOs, unfortunately, are going to bite their agents at some point. I think the whole putting your eggs in multiple baskets argument actually increases your risk. It doesn't
Yeah.
decrease your risk because you're increasing the likelihood that you're going to get burned at some point in time.
Hey everybody, James Shepard here with another edition of the Merchant Sales Podcast. Today we're talking about how to build an ISO to 600 plus mids per month. So I'll talk more about that in a minute, but it's with Dustin Magaziner. Really, really cool interview. If you want to get kind of behind the scenes of what it really takes to scale up an ISO, that's what we're talking about today. A lot of interesting concepts and ideas there. Then we go into our Today in Payments. And so Patti Murphy shares a bunch of really cool insights with us about what's happening today in the payments industry, and we have those conversations. As always, this episode is brought to you by Nativia. You can head over to nativia.com/CC Sales Pro to check that out. Also, I want to give you a little heads up about a couple of really cool things we're going to be talking more about. Number one is if you sell Clover, you're an agent, you're an ISO, you sell Clover. You are going to want to check out what Nativia has to offer. They have done some really creative things on the hardware financing side that really make a unique offer. And so if you're like you're an ISO, you're looking for a high split, but you still want to be able to get the hardware financing piece done, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Nativia and ask them about their Clover financing options and just kind of their Clover program in general. I won't get into all the details here, but we'll talk more about it in upcoming episodes. So that's number one. Number two, there is a new card coming out from Nativia that's going to help you with hardware financing in general. That's with different vendors. I was actually on a call with Vlad and a very, very well-known hardware company yesterday. So I'm not going to share any details. I'm going to leave you in suspense, but it is coming and it is really, really cool. It's going to give you the opportunity to make larger hardware purchases and finance that hardware. So some really, really cool stuff happening there. So again, target market, right? If you're talking about Nativia in general, is you are an ISO, you're looking to scale and grow, you need capital, and you're trying to get to that next level, head over to nativia.com/CC Sales Pro and check it out. One last thing I want to mention, Dustin Magaziner, PayBright, they are indeed a paid advertiser of CC Sales Pro and of the podcast. And so I do like to mention that here. Now, this is a podcast episode. I do them regularly with lots of people in the industry, but I always want to mention that he is on our website as a sponsor and a podcast, sponsor. So, anything I say that's biased towards Dustin just turns out I think he's a great guy and I love what he's doing, but I always want to mention that as well. So with that being said, let's dive into today's episode. Hey everybody, I'm here today with my good friend Dustin Magaziner from PayBright. How you doing today, Dustin?
I am great. Best day ever.
Yeah, awesome. Great to have you on. So today, Dustin actually reached out to me, which I loved, and he reached out and said, "Hey, why don't I just kind of peel everything back and kind of show the industry what it's like to build to 600 mids a month plus, and to really build a large ISO, and what does that mean? What does the data actually look like, and what are the pitfalls in the bit of it?" So I always love your transparency, so I'm really looking forward to the conversation, Dustin. But to start off with, for those who maybe haven't heard one of your other episodes, give us a little context of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Dustin. I started PayBright when I was in college, like so many listeners here, just selling door to door. Since then, PayBright has grown to more than 900 active agents across the country, more than 15,000 merchants. We'll break 20,000 almost, certainly in the next 12 months. And we're just on a really fun trajectory and having a lot of fun doing it. So I've been where most folks listening are or have been, and also want to get a little further myself.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's a great starting point. So let's start with this question. So you're obviously at this pretty high level right now, high level of production. How long did it take you to get there? And I'm curious, like, was it this kind of really consistent climb, or was it more like you struggled for 3 years and you figured it out and then kind of moonshot? Like, tell me about that trajectory.
Yeah. So I think the easiest metric and I'll go into more depth, is that it took us about 5 years to sign our first 1,000 merchants,
Mhm.
which now takes us less than 60 days. So if that gives a comparison about kind of acceleration, I think that's a really great,
Yep.
comparison. What we did in 5 years, we now do every less than 60 days.
Right.
And I think that'll continue, right? That difference where it'll become 30
Mhm.
days and 3
Right.
weeks and so on. So it was not overnight. right? When I was selling, it was just me out in the field. I'd write 10, 20, 30 mids a month. I was pretty solid at selling, but of course the industry has changed. And I think we'll talk about some of that here as
Mhm.
well. Um, but was just out selling. Then I went and started bringing a few friends into the business. And we were what I referred to as a green agent business. Agents and merchant services who had no experience, teach them the business, go out, sign accounts. And we were successful at that. I mean, we got to over 1,000 merchants plus doing it that way. Had a number of agents that were homegrown agents, but I found it hard to scale. Um, it's really hard. How many agents can I be out in the field training? They don't know the
Right.
industry. So we really pivoted around 2018 um, to focusing on providing value to people that are already in the business. And then from 2018 through today is really where a lot of our acceleration has been, even more so, I would say, between 2021 and today.
Mm.
So the last 4 years, we've added probably 80% of the merchants that are on our portfolio, as opposed to the number of years before that.
Mm. Yeah, this is a little off the wall question, but I just thought of this. If looking back at that, I guess that's about what, 7 years. What would you say is the key strategic insight, or like, what did you, when you say, okay, I decided I'm going to go after these experienced agents, what was it that they wanted? Like, why was it successful?
Yeah, so I really asked myself the question, and I think there's some other background. So right at that time, unfortunately, I had a provider that I was an agent for, or we were a small ISO
Right.
for, do some things to me that I really didn't like. They started doing a lot of things that agents have happened to them when they trust the wrong providers. And so there was a catalyst, right? If that hadn't
Mm.
happened, I probably would have stayed on the same trajectory, continuing to build my agent shop, training them, local, etc. But they started to increase pricing on us. They started to change comp plans and just do all of these things that fundamentally were wrong, and that I don't believe in. And so that happened, and I had to pivot. And then I started to think to myself, wait a second, this isn't
Mm.
just happening to me. This company is huge. How many other agents were impacted? And then the answer was a lot. And then this ISO over here did the same thing, and that one over there did the same thing. And I learned, unfortunately, that more often than not, agents are with companies that aren't companies I would trust my business with. And so that really became kind of the aha moment. It was really the byproduct of
Mm.
having some unfortunate things happen to me and my merchants.
I love it. Yeah, I feel like the best businesses are usually solving your own problem, and it sounds like that's kind of what you did.
Yeah, I had a lot of agents over the years ask, almost like some of what PayBright offers sounds too good to be true. And my answer is it too good to be true, or is it really just what it should be?
Right.
Is
We
some
set
of
the bar
these
so
things.
low that it's like,
Yeah, it's sad, but it's true.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
yeah,
I agree. All right. So here's our next kind of question on the data side. So we're building a big ISO. How many agents, we talk about going after industry agents, how many agents do you have to recruit to find a real producer? Give us some context around that. And then when we define a quote unquote producer, you said you have all these active agents. What does that mean? Do they normally do one or two a month? Do they do five a month? Give us some context on that.
Yeah, great question. And admittedly, these are some things I had to actually dive into the data on. Um, I didn't. I had a suspicion on a lot of this, but I didn't have
Yeah, yeah.
every item off the top of my head. And some of it was better, some of it was different than I was expecting. So when I was personally recruiting early on in what I'd call smaller batches, the numbers were higher, right? Back then, when I was recruiting, probably 60% of the experienced agents that I would sign would activate. Now, the industry has also changed since then. You were selling terminals, it was a little bit of an easier sales process.
Right.
Hey, Bright, today, we recruit probably somewhere in the ballpark of 30 to 40 new agents month over month. We have about a 45% activation rate on those agents, which is actually much higher than I was expecting. Going
That's a
into
lot
reviewing.
higher than I would have thought. Yeah.
Yeah, so I pulled a static set of data. So for those that are data folks, I pulled data from January through April because if somebody signed an agent agreement with PayBright 2 weeks ago, maybe they haven't had time to activate yet. So I looked at
Right.
specifically January through April, all of the agents we recruited, and of that, 45% of those agents have actually activated with us, which was much higher than I was expecting, especially kind of at the scale that we recruit. I was actually really surprised by it.
Yeah,
I was excited to give
that's
some
really
positive news
good.
to our team.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think even with that, if we were to talk about what I identify as one of our biggest areas still for improvement, it's that. It's getting our activation rate even higher. I want it to be
Mm.
55, 60%.
Mm.
Um, I think agents sign up with PayBright for a reason. It's not just another option. So I think it actually should be a lot higher than that.
Mm.
But about 45% of our agents activate in some way, shape, or form. Activation just means that they're writing some level of
Yeah,
business, right?
they wrote at least one deal with PayBright.
Exactly.
Right.
So, out of every 10 agents we sign, 4 to 5 are going to write a deal.
Mm.
Of that, then of course the question is, well, how do we kind of define like agent production? What does it look like in today's day and age? Because if you go to like forums or talk to people, there's still a lot of people out there talking about writing 10, 20 deals a month. And yeah, those people do exist, but they're far and few between. If it used to be 1% of the industry 15 years ago, add another zero in front of that. I mean, it is just not the industry norm. And the folks, a lot of the time, who talk a big game, sure, maybe they've done it 1 month, but then the rest of the year they
Mm.
haven't, right? It is not normal for an agent to write 10 deals a month anymore. Margins are higher, profitability is better, but technology is also much more of a factor. And so the sales process is slower. A merchant, is going to consider things a little bit slower than they used to. So what we show is that we have basically agents broken up into 4 categories of production. Our first category are what I call kind of the semi-active agents. Maybe this is a side hustle or otherwise. They're
Right.
going to typically write somewhere between 4 and 8 accounts a year. That's a year, less than
Right.
one a month, maybe one a quarter. We love them. We have a lot of them. Nothing wrong with that. But, production wise, 4 to 8 deals, per year is what we typically see. The next category is going to be agents who are typically doing this as their main source of income. They might not be, what I'd say, wealthy, but they're writing 10 to 25 mids a year, right? So typically one, maybe two accounts a month. There's a lot of these agents. This is your probably everyday active independent agent these days. Um, Next category is going to be what I'd call like you're starting to get into the higher level producers at this point. This is your 25 to 50 deals a year mark. So your 2 to 4 accounts. This is another big portion. So most of the agents we have are going to be in the first 3 categories, right? These agents make up the majority of the mids that come in every month, statistically.
Mm.
And then last are going to be the partners that are writing 50 accounts a month or more. They're I'm
They're
sorry, 50 accounts a year
a
or more.
year.
They
Yeah.
they are they a year. They are far and few between at the agent level these days. Again, that's not to say we don't have an agent have a killer month, but you also have to factor in the seasonality. If someone goes on vacation for 2 months of the year, how does that
Right.
impact their average when they have a zero, 2 months out of the year and so on? So
Right.
those are kind of the tiers that we look at it.
Mm.
Obviously it can be somewhat fluid, and there's
Right.
also this natural agent attrition that every ISO has to be aware of. If I have an agent who writes 50 deals a year their first 2 years, now that they're at 100, they're making a lot of money. They have a six-figure income. They're doing really well. Chances are by year 3 or 4, they're starting to slow down,
Mm.
enjoy the fruits of their labor, service their portfolio. So now they go from 50 a year down to that maybe 25 to 40 category. And
Right.
so there's this natural kind of de-escalation, not because we did anything wrong, not because they're upset, but it is the nature of residual income sometimes. The person who keeps the gas pedal down for years straight, never
Right.
stops, they're pretty rare.
Yeah. Let me ask this question. For those agents that are doing that like 10 to 25 a year, let's say, and you of course wouldn't have data on this, but I'm just curious your insight. Do you think that there are a lot of those agents that are doing 50 plus, but they're just doing some with you and some with 3 other companies? Or you know what I mean? Like how big of a part do you think that still plays? Or are the agents kind of settling into like this is my provider? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's 50-50. So I have different opinions on this than the industry at large. So I think the industry at large, maybe even your camp to some extent, has promoted this idea for years that agents should have multiple homes for differences in product offerings.
Mhm.
But also, I think this saying of don't put your eggs in all in one basket, almost like security. I actually completely disagree with that model. I think that at the end of the day, if you listen to what I said before, which is that I believe most ISOs, unfortunately, are going to bite their agents at some point. It's unfortunately a reality. If I were to say that I'm making up numbers here, this is not data driven, but if there's a 70% chance that a random ISO you choose is not a great long-term fit, if you choose three, you are going to get burned 2 out of 3 times. If you choose one, you got to choose right. You got to do your research. I actually think you can de-risk your situation if you pick the right provider. So I think the whole putting your eggs in multiple baskets argument actually increases your risk. It doesn't
Yeah.
decrease your risk because you're increasing the likelihood that you're going to get burned at some point in time. I've seen it happen time and time again. It's like I chose
Oh,
these
me
three
too.
crosters, and meanwhile, two out
Yeah.
of the three of them do burn them.
Right.
So I do think there's some that maybe we're getting 20, somewhere else is getting 10, somewhere else is getting 10. But for most agents that are in that, 20 mid a year mark, I think a lot of them are just there,
Yeah, that's where
independently.
they're at. Yeah.
Um, it's just what the numbers are
Yeah.
these days. And
Well, I
I think
think,
that,
I think what's really interesting too, like we in our last podcast talked about the point of sale system that you guys partnered with. Like I've even started publicly to change my opinion on this point because for me it wasn't about the risk as much, it was more about the solutions. Right? We went through this transition where it was like in order to get a yes, you had to have a solution for that merchant and the truth of it was ISOs at, let's say 7 years ago, right? ISOs just had awful solutions. And so you really had to like search around to be like, well, okay, I want to sell five verticals. I almost need at least three ISOs to be able to sell those five because, but now I think as we've started to see better solutions coming out, I think now it is a little bit more realistic to like find a home and like, okay, I can put all my business with this company. And from an operating perspective, obviously much better. The risk component comes into it, but like you said, I mean, you got to be really careful, do your research and pick right. But yeah, I don't disagree with you on that anymore at all. I think again, it's to me, it's more solutions driven than anything else. It's like what verticals are you selling? If you're selling two extremely specialized verticals and there's only one ISO that works with each of them, well, you're going to have two ISOs, but you know what I mean?
understood and agreed. Um, I think for the average merchant service agent, though, there's still a struggle and a challenge to adopt technology. And so I
Mm,
think there's actually some negatives to jumping in to all of these different ISOs and products before you've
for
mastered
sure.
even anything. So
For sure.
I believe you are better off as an agent investing in one company. This has hurt me at times. There have been partners that were, recruiting, and if I said, "Hey, do 20% of your business with us," I probably would have gotten that. And I've been honest, and I've told them I think you're actually better off long term, fully investing in one company. Having it so the owner or CEO of that company knows who you are by name, has your cell phone number. When you need something, you call them.
Right.
When, there's a product situation, you have a voice at the table. I think these are things that are often left out of that conversation.
I agree.
And frankly, it benefited me over the years.
Yeah.
I operated like that as a agent when I was selling, and it was a big value to me.
I love it. All right, so I've got a couple more questions here I want to run through. So the first one is we just talked about verticals a second ago. What are the top five verticals when you look at the agent channel? What verticals are agents actually selling these days?
Yeah. So this is from PayBright's data, and this could be skewed due to some of the products we sell, of course.
Of course.
Obviously, if you're really heavy in a restaurant point of sale, that's like if you ask Toast this question, guess what? There's one answer, right?
Right, right.
So obviously, some of the products we sell impact that. But for us, PayBright's number one vertical is restaurant, QSR, bars. It's about a quarter of our overall portfolio, which is actually
Mm,
larger than I would have guessed going in. The second most common vertical, I'm kind of putting two together, are liquor stores and grocery stores. Kind of looking at them as one. That is a big vertical for us still.
Is
Mechanic and
that is
auto
there
shops
is that the POS the one that you did that partnership? I can't forget the name of it. What solution is that you sell to?
figure, and that's for restaurants specifically. So
Okay,
we're pretty heavy in the restaurant space. We do have other solutions we sell into
right,
liquor and grocery. Um, I think the reason why liquor and grocery. So I ran this based on volume, not
right.
based on number of mids.
Oh, sure.
Liquor
Okay.
st- Liquor stores and grocery have high
High
volumes.
volume. Okay,
So
got it. Okay.
exactly.
Right.
Um, the next on the category, which probably is on the higher end of mids, but maybe lower per mid volume, is mechanic and auto shops. I think that these are high on any processor
Yeah.
ISOs list,
Agents
just given
love
that
these.
agents love them.
Yeah.
There's so many in every town. I mean, you can drive around this town and find 200 of them around where I am right now. Um, for us, next is medical. Medical is actually a pretty high one for us. The reason for this is we have on our end a few specific sales partnerships that only focus on medical. And so if 100% of their portfolios are all medical, it does drive up our average a little bit. So we have some, like medical record solutions and softwares that have integrated to us that are, a considerable portion of our overall portfolio.
Hmm.
And I actually was a little bit of an overachiever here. I actually put six because five and six were almost tied,
Yeah.
and are somewhat similar. So five and six different industries is smoke shops, vape, tobacco, CBD.
Mhm.
There's a huge market for it. And then last is gas stations. We do a ton of petroleum, gas pumps, and,
Really?
and
I did not
everything
know
there.
that. The
We do a
petroleum
ton.
side. I'm surprised by that. So what do you use? Is that bypass or like what are you using for that?
It's all bypass. It's pretty much what any agent ISO shop, if they're boarding gas stations or boarding on bypass, we do a lot of it. and it's, frankly pretty easy as long as your tech support team knows what they're doing.
I was gonna say
So
your tech
yeah,
support team really has to know what they're doing though. That's a that for an onboarding perspective, there are a few tricks to that one. So that's pretty cool actually.
yeah. So it's easier than I think people realize when you have full access to everything within Bypass. So we can build our own
Okay.
all our own lanes and VAR sheets and everything with an FDPOS. We can support and do all that. A lot of other ISOs are having to like sit on the phone with Bypass for 3 hours. And don't get me wrong, I mean there are times we have to call Bypass as well, and that's brutal. But at the end of the
Right.
day, when you do it regularly, we support a lot of it.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, I think that the number of ISOs that support gas stations is becoming less and less. More and more companies, I think, are either not in it or getting away from it, or TSIS only shops who isn't certified for fleet. So I don't think there's that many solutions for it, but a lot of agents avoid it. So
Right. Right.
yeah, we like it
Interesting.
though.
Okay, so next question. We're kind of going rapid fire here, but
Yeah.
let's talk about free terminal placement. So I think a lot of people see what you're doing and they're like, man, how's it giving away all this free hardware, right? So talk about the economics and the decision behind, are you viewing this at a portfolio level, at an account level? Like, how are you making these decisions? So talk to us about, giving away hardware and even like Clover. I believe you now have a free placement program. So talk about that decision and kind of the strategy behind that.
Yeah. So equipment is one of our largest overall expenses at PayBright. I mean, before I dive into the numbers, PayBright will spend north of 1.5 million on probably the low end, upwards of 2 million just this year alone on new account acquisition, just on their equipment costs. On our free placement program. So this isn't how much we're spending on terminals and then selling, right? It's how much we're spending on terminals that we're then giving away. So I mean, it's a seven-figure number. Um, Obviously we do expect and need to see returns on that. We can't just lose a million or two every year. But it does prove to be a strong ROI for us. We do look at it as a portfolio level, right? Not as an individual merchant level. But we did make a really big change on our free equipment program maybe 2 years ago. 2 years ago we had what I used to market or promote as, the best free equipment program in the business. And I still think to this day that we do, but we changed it. Back then, we played more in the sandbox that everyone else did. Just any merchant that came on board with us could get a free this or a free that. Didn't matter how much they processed, didn't matter what their margin was. And that is very sales friendly and very agent friendly. But what it's not is margin friendly. It doesn't actually make anyone any money. And I look at my job and my responsibility as helping our agents, our sales partners, our ISOs actually make money, right? What I
Right.
call move the needle. And giving them a terminal on an account they're going to make $20 a month on doesn't actually do that. And that's what started happening. I think in one single month, we had 200 accounts that we gave terminals away that made no sense. Like a Clover Flex going to a merchant that we were going to make $2 a month on. And so
Right.
there were so many negative ones. There were still a lot of positive ones, but there were so many negative ones that I said, what if we just invested all of the negative dollars into even bigger opportunities? And so we expanded the upper end of our frequent program even more with things like free Clover duos and so on, while basically saying we're not going to give a micro merchant a free terminal anymore. We used to do that. I mean, a
Hmm.
merchant could literally sign up for $1,000 a month and we give them a free Clover Flex. That's
Wow.
how it worked. So
Right.
we did make some changes, and it's actually helped us grow faster because the upper end, the higher margin deals have skyrocketed. So our average profit per deal has gone up, our average volume has gone up, the amount our
Mhm.
agents are making has gone up. It's been a huge win.
Wow.
Our average cost per merchant on free placement is about 600 a mid. And that is with normal rev shares. We're not impacting like agent comp plans on our free placement program. We invest based on the margin of deals. Um, there are deals that we do that are $10,000 in free equipment, right? Or
Mhm.
more. Those are obviously large deals. Um, but yeah, we use it very strategically to our advantage and our agents' advantage.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Okay, last question on operating side of this. So, I think you guys deploy your own hardware, right? From
We
PayBright.
manage all Yeah, we manage all deployment. We use a 3PL for parts of it, but yes, we do everything on our end in terms of like
Right.
deployment, bio builds, etc. Yeah.
Sure. Any tips for the ISO that's kind of scaling that up to say like, man, how do you deploy? What are the key things you wish you would have known about deploying lots of terminals?
Well, I mean, if you had asked me 2, maybe 3 years ago, at that time, what our biggest issue was, it was deployment. Um, think of it this way. Think again, I told you guys my background. I started as a college student selling credit card machines basically out of my dorm room. So think about what deployment looked like in the early days. It was like I would order 20 terminals, they would come to my
Right.
apartment, and if somebody needed a terminal, I'd plug it in and ship it. Like I would drive to FedEx and
Right.
ship it. There's a really funny video and a picture. There's two funny ones. One of the entire hallway of my old apartment from years ago, just covered with hundreds of terminals. I ordered some bulk order because I got a great price, and it's
Right.
just down the hallway. Another one is like my dog sleeping in our spare bedroom, and it's just her and all terminals in there.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so that was deployment early on. So think about like having to scale, right?
Yeah.
So it went from that to like a tiny little closet in our office and just it wasn't scalable. And so we ran into problems where, we couldn't warehouse enough machines. We were constantly like out of stock. We couldn't physically get terminals like on a table and plug them in. There wasn't enough room or enough outlets and all these issues. So the main suggestion is build to scale, right? Whatever system you're going to have, you may only need to ship two terminals today and three tomorrow. But what happens if you need to do 50 next week or
Mhm.
100 next week? That's something you have to prepare for, right? On average, PayBright probably ships, if we were to break it down by day, probably something like 30, 35 to, terminals, maybe a little bit more per day. But we have single days where we have to ship 80 or 90 or 100 in a single day. So you have to be prepared for this fluctuation
Mm.
because your merchants and your agents don't understand that you're 2 days behind because we got a franchise that needs 200 terminals this week, right?
Right. They
They,
still want to
they,
get their
they expect
terminal next day for their single location auto repair shop.
And we can't tell the franchise that it's going to take 3 weeks either, right? So you
Right.
have to be able to grow to scale and maintain business as usual as much as
Yeah.
possible. That's the main thing I would think about is whatever
Love it.
your goals are, build for that
Yeah.
now and then go and reach that.
Yeah. I love it. Dustin, it's always so insightful talking to you. And again, I'm sure we'll have further conversations about this in other episodes. But before I let you go, I definitely want to have you share kind of where agents can go to learn more. I'm sure a lot of agents want to learn about the programs that you have to offer. So where would you send them to learn more about you and about PayBright?
Yeah, you can go to our website. Our website is gopaybright.com. Or, of course, you can call in and speak to someone on our team. Our office line is 984-272-2568. So, again, gopaybright.com or give us a call. There's a lot of people here that'd be happy to talk to you.
Awesome. Dustin, thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate it.
Likewise, thanks so much.
So the payments landscape has undergone a profound transformation over the past decade, with digital wallets and virtual cards, emerging as pivotal forces. Indeed, a decade of relentless innovation, largely driven by fintech advancements and widespread adoption of smartphones, has fundamentally reshaped the consumer payment habits. Digital payments, once deemed, quote, alternative, now dominate online transactions and are rapidly gaining at the physical point of sale.
Hmm.
This all according to a new report from UPay. That's a payments and loyalty app that's based in the UK, but it claims global presence. So here's a few high level points. Digital wallet spending grew nearly tenfold over the space of a decade,
Hmm.
from 1.6 trillion in 2014 to 15.7 trillion in 2024,
Wow.
right? And it's projected to double again by 2030 to exceed 28 trillion dollars,
Hmm.
which, to put that in perspective, exceeds the United States GDP in 2023.
Hmm. Wow.
That's pretty incredible. So virtual cards, meanwhile, are gaining traction among both businesses and individuals,
Hmm.
consumers, due to their enhanced security features and the ability to streamline expense management,
Right.
especially for online transactions, in the B2B sphere.
Right.
Virtual cards are expected to total $5.4 trillion dollars this year and to nearly triple by 2030 when they're forecast to reach $14.3 trillion dollars.
Hmm. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Those are some big numbers.
Those are really numbers to be reckoned with,
Yeah.
Um
Hmm.
a- and I know you and I we've talked about virtual cards a lot
Yep.
lately,
Yep.
I mean, it's definitely a perfect opportunity for the B2B sphere, but it also has consumer implications,
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think people are, you know, you're always kind of concerned. You got your card. We've all had those experiences where the card gets compromised
Right,
or what or stolen or whatever, and then you're like, okay, I now have to go to all of my subscriptions and redo all my cards. And so
right,
those virtual cards are great. Like at our company, we've talked about it before, but for our business, we do virtual cards for each of our major vendors. And so if one of those cards gets compromised, we just have to go back and update that one payment method for that one vendor. We're not using the same card across all of our vendors.
right, right,
And the other thing is we can put special limitations on, like you mentioned, the security. So we can say, hey, for this card, there can only be one transaction a month and it can be for no more than $500 because we know that we have a subscription that's $495 a month.
right.
So if somebody wants to go spend money, it's like, well, you can only spend one transaction and it can't be more than $500. So good luck, you know?
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, no, I mean they have so many, implications. And security is probably the biggest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus sign, plus in the plus column. So,
Right. Right. Hmm.
so next up, while merchants are hot on the trails of digital wallets, buy now, pay later, and A to A and real-time payments, they appear to be dropping the ball on a frictionless final step of the purchase process, that being the one-click checkout.
Hmm.
That's a big takeaway from a new payments intelligence WorldPay report. Among global shoppers surveyed, 84% said one-click checkout is an important factor in choosing where they shop,
Hmm.
and 18% picked retailers based solely on whether that's an option that's offered.
Hmm.
Some other noteworthy data points: 99% of cross border shoppers want to use a preferred payment method, and 94% want to pay in their local currency.
Hmm.
And digital wallets account for 66% of global e commerce. Buy now, pay later has grown from 2.3. I love this stat. This just like blew my mind. Because you and I mean, when buy now, pay later first started, you know, bubbling up to the surface,
Right.
we talked about it like, oh, yeah, this is a nice opportunity,
Right.
right?
Right.
Well, it's grown from a $2.3 billion niche to $343 billion,
Wow.
which in the space of a decade.
Hmm.
I mean,
Wow.
that's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
I just can't even wrap my head around like what is that, 150 fold or something like
Mhm. Right.
that?
Right. In such a short time. Yeah.
In a very short time. And it's not like it's, I mean, really it's just a new spin on an old way of commerce, I mean, it's sort of
Right.
like it's like the layaway, only you get to take it home with you.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Hmm. Very interesting stats for sure.
yeah, yeah. So, I want to talk about Bitcoin for a minute.
Okay.
We've talked about that before, and
Yep. Yep.
and an article that just posted in Restaurant Finance Monitor offers some interesting food for thought regarding payment acceptance. And that was, I use that food for thought specifically because it was restaurants.
Yes.
Um,
Pun.
and the pun was intended. And it sort of shows you, like, when I do my research, I really dive into some really
Yes.
obscure publications and
Right.
things,
Right.
you know. So they have this article, should a restaurant consider accepting Bitcoin? And it goes through a bunch of pros and cons. One big positive for restaurateurs, the article notes, is cost. Obviously, most crypto gateways charge about uh, 50 basis points to 150 basis points per transaction,
Right.
which is well below the 2 to 4% charged by credit card processors.
Right. And there's no chargebacks. So,
And there's no chargebacks.
right.
Of course, with restaurants, it's kind of hard to do a chargeback.
Anyway, right.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Although it's funny you say that, although it does happen. I was actually working with an agent, yesterday or 2 days ago or something. I was talking to an agent and he has a big deal. It's like a huge, restaurant, multi-location. And he asked them what their biggest annoyance was. And they actually like their point of sale system, but the chargebacks is a big deal for them because, they get a lot of them because, law of large numbers. They have a lot of, there's a lot of revenue. So people do file chargebacks at restaurants. And then when they do, they don't know what to do about it, because it's like, well, here's the receipt, but what are we, so how is this to prove that we gave them the food? You know what I mean? It's like they
Right,
ate it, you know?
right, exactly. You have the
It's
cameras
funny.
going in the
Yeah,
restaurant or something, right?
right. And it's like, are you really gonna pull that every time somebody does a, $80 chargeback? You know, it's like, so anyway, yeah. So but they do get those chargebacks. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, but it's interesting. Well, a potential headache, on the other hand, are the tax implications, and we haven't really talked a lot about that. But the IRS requires a merchant to reflect the fair value of the cryptocurrency on the day it was received in its gross income.
Mm.
Then, when the digital currency is sold, the transaction is subject to capital gains taxes.
Right. Well, and remember, we discussed on so two things I want to say about that. Number one is they could avoid that altogether if they worked with one of these places that'll charge 100 to 150 basis points because they'll do an instant conversion to fiat, which means
Right,
the restaurant
right,
actually never even owned crypto. It,
exactly.
it it was paid through this other intermediary that converted it to fiat. So if they do that, they wouldn't have to worry about it at all. The other thing is remember that there is the now I'm checking myself here. Was this law passed or I can't remember was it a executive order, but that thing that Trump was talking about where they can spend up to a certain amount of money on a transaction and it would not be considered capital gains on either side.
Right. That was an
So
executive order that I think has not actually been put out yet, but has been sort of talked about.
talked about. Right. So if that
Yeah.
if that were to come out, that would potentially solve this
That
problem.
would solve this problem completely. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You know, um, and then I want to put all this into perspective because according to the Fed, in 2023, which is the most recent year for which it has data, just 1% of Americans paid for purchases using cryptocurrencies.
Right.
And about 28% of adult Americans, or 65 million Americans, own cryptocurrency.
Hmm.
So
Wait, what was that number again? Was it, did you say 5%? Was it?
28% of U.S. adults,
Oh, wow.
okay,
Okay.
which is 65 million people.
So 28% of that's so interesting. That's it doesn't that really does speak to that the problem right now with crypto, right? Because it's like 28% have bought it, 1% have used it to buy something.
Right.
It's just, so right now it's really just this kind of asset for retained value. It's not a means of currency exchange. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's going to
Hmm.
be the case for a while. I mean,
Well, until some of these impediments, I mean, we're still, I think, aren't we still a month or two away from Square allowing all their merchants to do crypto,
yeah, yeah, I
right?
think it's October.
So and it's like I was funny. I was talking to so a friend of mine owns a like a ice cream truck, and
Uh-huh.
he uses Square, much to my chagrin. Um, and I'll get him over to full stack payments here soon. So, but anyways, but so he uses Square, and I came up there and we were just talking about payments. And he jokingly said, are you going to pay for this with crypto today, James? Or, because he knows I'm a payments guy. And
Right,
I was like, hey, don't laugh about that. I was like, I will be back in a few months and I will pay with crypto because you have Square and you're going to be able to accept crypto whether you like it or not.
right.
And it'll instantly convert if you want, but it will be set up on there. And he's like, what? So, he thought that was really cool. And so I do think I think when that starts happening and then if this law passes or the executive order comes out or whatever to reduce the threshold for capital gains tax tracking, I think that could make a big difference.
Oh, I think it could. I mean, I would love to pay for. I mean, well, where I am, I don't get ice cream trucks, but like,
Yeah, yeah.
when I uh go down to the city and go to a club or like a restaurant where I have several friends that are in bands, so I go and watch them
Right, right.
play. And a lot of these places, especially like the brew houses and so forth,
Hmm.
they don't serve food, but they have food trucks all around.
Yeah, yeah.
And it always cracks me up because depending on I was at this one place one time. It was a winery, and they had food trucks, and I saw this guy with his phone going, trying to trying to find a signal, like.
Right, right. Yes, that's funny.
And finally I was like, can I just pay with cash, please?
Right, right,
Like, I really want to get my taco. I mean,
right, right. That's funny. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I think that I think that by and large, most of the people I know with crypto are holding it as an investment.
Right,
Spending
right.
it is like, it's kind of a novelty. They might do it once or twice just to see how it
Right.
works.
Right.
But
But
yeah.
you do have to think though that they're and it's funny because one of the things I love about making content over a long period of time is being able to track my own evolution on
Uh-huh.
ideas. And I mean,
Right.
3 years ago I was like this. A year ago I was like, I don't know, crypto acceptance. I don't know, what's the point?
Right.
I'm starting to see that there is this pent up demand for commerce. I mean, there's billions and billions of dollars held by U.S. consumers in Bitcoin,
Right.
and again, if a few, this is one area where the government can have such a huge impact on the way that commerce works in a country. Because if a country goes all in on crypto, Brazil is an example of that, but
Right.
in the US market, if we're going to do that and we're actually going to lower the threshold for tax tracking, allow it to be used like a currency, we're going to lower regulation and allow these things to, I mean, there is a lot of pent up demand. I think a lot of those 65 million people, I think if they went down, then they've all got the app on their phone, to access their crypto, right? Just because that's
Right.
what you do
Right.
when you have crypto. I mean, if they go down and they start everywhere they go, it's like, oh wow, all we got to do is tap our phone here. We can pay with crypto. I think they're going to think that's pretty cool, and I think they're going to want to
I
do it. You
I
know,
I see that like in the next year or two.
maybe even 5 years. Like it might, you know what I mean? It might take
Yeah,
a little while to
but
to
I see
build.
it happening at some point.
Yeah,
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 agreed.
I do too.
Especially with younger people. I mean, a lot of the people I know who are holding crypto and want to spend it are in their 20s and 30s.
Right, right. Yep, absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
and I
so
think at some point they're going to be like, okay, and again, we talked about it before, but this thing of like allowing them to spend this money tax free, of like they bought crypto and 10 years later it's worth seven
right,
times what they paid for it.
right,
They have a huge capital gains tax implication there. If they
right.
can decide, you know what, for the next year, our family's just going to use crypto to buy everything,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not going to pay any tax
Avoid all the
on
taxes.
that
Yeah,
capital gains, that's a pretty big financial incentive to go out there and use your crypto, especially with inflation and everything else. So I don't know.
yeah,
I'm starting to see the rationale for it. I don't think it's an urgent rationale, but I think it's coming.
yeah. No, I agree. I think it's coming too. So finally, we talk a lot about, and we haven't just now, talk a lot about digital wallets and virtual cards and
Yep.
cryptocurrencies and other newbie payment methods. But, let's not forget about the old tried and true stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to, like, for example, the ACH.
Yep.
ACH payment volume grew by 5.5% on a daily average basis during the first half of this year, according to
Mm.
Nacha, which keeps tabs on the ACH.
Right. Right.
It was used to process 17.25 billion payments from January 1 to June 30th.
Mm.
$45 trillion dollars in payments during the first half of the year, which was a 6.8% increase over the same 6 month period last year.
Mm.
Now, factors driving ACH growth include, of course, same day ACH,
Mm-hmm.
which we've talked about before.
Right.
It charted year over year volume growth of 15%. That's
Right.
pretty significant. B2B payments, which grew about 10%. And consumer payments, which grew 6%, which might not be as, great as same day ACH, but, you know, by and large, the ACH in the past was a business
Right. Right.
mechanism, not a consumer mechanism.
Right.
The consumer payments include things like bill payments, recurring payments like
Right.
recurring bill payments and donations, subscription services, and account to account transactions, like funding your digital wallet, right?
Right. Right.
So, I think going forward, we're going to see even more transactions traverse the ACH now that the government has eliminated check issuance.
Right.
Because the
Right.
government historically has been probably the largest single user of the ACH.
Right.
Benefits, Social Security, Medicare, all those kind of things are sent through the ACH.
Right.
Now that, or check,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
but it's interesting. I read the other day that this government mandate about doing away with checks has a few drawbacks, and one of them is I think it was like the uh, the Amish, which don't believe in modern
Yeah.
day
Right.
thing, and I didn't realize that a lot of them don't have bank accounts.
So how do they get their Social Security or whatever through the AC?
Yeah,
Well, wait, do they even I didn't think that they even contributed to
I don't think they would
Social
contribute
Security
to
and
Social
all that.
Security, but there would have to be some sort of like the tax
Well,
payments.
that's right. They're still going to pay taxes, potentially get tax refunds. So that's
Right.
where I see. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. I don't know quite how that's gonna happen,
Right,
but
right.
yeah.
If we
So,
end up with an Amish person on our podcast to talk about this, that is going to be a very interesting interview.
it'd be interesting, right? I had a
Uh,
uh it just reminded me I have this apartment and the dryer died the other day, a couple weeks ago. So
yeah.
I go on, Marketplace. I go on Marketplace and I see this dryer. It's a good deal. And we have a lot of Mennonites around our area, and the Mennonites are sort of like the liberals of the
Yes.
Amish,
Yes.
you know. Um, and so I get this, the guy's like, okay, sure, here's the dryer, and this is what I want, and can you pay in cash? I'm like,
Right.
sure, I don't mind.
Right. Right.
Um, and I get there, and it's like this really young Mennonite family. It's like, oh, now I know why you want to cash.
Right,
You
right, right.
know?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, one of my best childhood friends actually, his dad grew up Amish, and so they came out of that. And even my wife Christine on her side of the family, they go back to some Mennonite roots just like one generation ago. So we're very familiar with that world.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's
and
and around here, I have this one place that I go to for my yard tools, my
yeah, yeah,
chainsaws and so forth.
right,
And I have to it's it's a good hunk away. It's a good 40-minute drive. And I
yeah,
pass a lot of other places, but it's this Mennonite family that runs this place
yeah.
and they treat me with such respect,
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
you
Yeah, they
know?
have great business people. They've done very, very well, from in a
Yeah,
way. I
yeah.
actually did credit card processing for a lot of the Mennonite community back in the day, and
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was
and
one of
they,
my
they're the one day he asked me, he's like, you come all the way over here, from where you live. Why do you come all the way here? I'm like,
yeah.
because you're the only people that don't talk down to me. But
Yeah.
women buying chainsaws, it's not exactly God, you know?
That is true, Patty. You probably do look a little suspect walking out of Home Depot with a chainsaw. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
funny.
So
Well, good stuff,
anyway, well,
Patty.
that's it for this week, James.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much as always for the research. Always enjoy having these chats with you. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.